it's not that I don't think it'll have an impact. It's just that I think that the bets being placed today are still majorly in the area of workflow efficiency gains and maximizing the output of dwindling manpower or workforce, because that's a big problem right now.
I mean, you deal with some very unpredictable,
Yeah.
tough to deal with things. Like you said, weather, humans, transportation, like none of those are fun to deal with at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And so much of what happens on a job site goes undocumented. It goes, we have daily logs that are effectively there for the lawyers to argue over afterwards, and they don't really capture what happened. They don't really capture the efficiencies and the productivity. And then again, you have 30 companies all doing work on the same
Yeah.
footprint that they have their own data. They all have their own processes, and we're still getting subcontractors and material vendors into that digital norm. And so I think we have a way to go, but being able to talk to your data, being able to expose things that are usually reserved for those power users, I think that that's an easy win. But do I believe it's going to overhaul and change our industry overnight? No. Do I think that it will be a foundational piece of every construction technology software in 5 years? Yes, but a part of it for sure.
And we're back for another episode of the Startup Hustle. This is your host, Matt Watson. Very excited to be joined today by Chris Callen. He's the founder and CEO of Plot from Wichita, Kansas. Hello from Kansas.
Yes, sir.
It's always great to have local entrepreneurs on the show. We met at a local entrepreneur event, so super great to connect with you. Today we're going to talk about his company, his journey. It's the second company that he has started, been the CEO of three different companies. Definitely got some stories. I'm sure the good, the bad, like all the rest of us. We're going to talk about that today. And then he's in construction technology, which is also really interesting. Before we get started, I do want to remind you today's episode is brought to you by Fullscale, which is my company. If you're looking to hire software developers, check us out at fullscale.io. We help all sorts of companies across different industries, front end, back end, mobile, QA, different programming languages, all the different stuff. Check us out at fullscale.io. Chris, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
You're in Wichita, which is still home to a lot of aeronautical stuff, right? Like, is Boeing still headquartered there?
So Boeing is not headquartered, but just purchased or is working to acquire Spirit Air Systems. So was here and looks like they're back. So definitely, but yeah, then you got Beechcraft, Textron, you got a bunch of jobs that are in the aerospace industry for sure.
Yeah, most people don't realize that Wichita, Kansas, which is seemingly kind of in the middle of nowhere, is home to so much of this industry. And I'm sure there's a whole history about it. We could have a whole podcast on that. But it's cool that you're there. But how did you get to Wichita? Is that where you're originally from?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in even more of a middle of nowhere, Garden City, Kansas, and
Okay.
we moved to Wichita in high school, and so this is where my family is. I've moved around a few different times, but when it came time to start my family, we moved back just to be close to the in-laws and my parents and hers.
I'm sure Wichita is a great place to be. It's not a tier one or probably even tier two city. It's a really nice kind of tier two or tier three city. I drive through there on the way to Oklahoma, so I'm sure it's a nice place.
Great place for family and great place to build product for sure.
Yeah. Well, so tell us about Plot and what your company does today.
Yeah, so Plot is a job site coordination software. Primarily, we focus on the coordination of who goes where on the site, talking about all of the material deliveries that are coming from all over the planet, really, and that are used to make up of any building. So any building you sit in, every piece of matter came there on a truck, and it's a massive orchestration of getting it there at the right time, never getting it too early, because then you got to protect it and you got to move it again. And most of our job sites are built by 90% of the workers on site are of these different trade partners that are all separate companies as well. So it's just a massive orchestration of who goes where when, and Plot makes that very seamless and brings it all into the digital world.
I'm not an expert on construction, but I did a major remodeling in my house, and I can definitely relate to, because you have all these different subcontractors, be it somebody who's going to do this thing with the floor and this thing with the ceiling and plumbing, electrical, HVAC, framing, all different things, right? They can't all be there the same day. They all need different supplies. They need different tools. And, you think, oh, this guy's going to do this for a week, and then something doesn't happen. And then that screws up everybody else's schedule, right? Because everybody else was in line behind them.
Yep.
And I can only imagine how this problem compounds in a large job site, because now you've got bigger materials and bigger things and more and more and more, and you got massive teams of people doing stuff like.
Yep.
But your family had owned a construction company before.
Mm-hmm.
And is that how you originally got the idea for this? Was trying to solve their own problems?
Yeah, so my story in this whole journey began a birth. My mother and father worked in it full time, so it wasn't just one parent, it was both. So that dining room table was, the boardroom table. All the conversations were happening, but it was a small company. So I would work there on the winter breaks and summer breaks. And I kind of rebelled as a kid. I didn't want anything to do with what mom and dad did, because that's no fun. So I got into software, and that was my degree at KU. And then I went out and got my first job. And then 3G started hitting job sites. And we all of a sudden had this network connectivity that was at the workface. And all these other industries that had been so digitized for the last 2 decades when they're sitting at a desk, we now had this amazing opportunity to bring all of that know-how into the construction world. So I returned to the family company. I ran it for about 4 years. I grew it to a company of about 60 employees here in Wichita. We spun out my first software startup, and we ran that for about 4 years. It did not succeed to the level that we wanted, and we learned a lot of lessons from that. And then I worked for a Bay Area company for about a year, and then launched the second one again. But exactly to your point, the second company is so much more focused on what I saw day in, day out. It's the problems that the job site personnel were dealing with, and the things that they really wanted to solve, versus the other tool, which was very much outside of my perspective, even though it's still in construction.
So you actually got a degree in software development. Did you ever work as a software developer? Do you do the software development today?
No, never been a engineer, never been a developer by any stretch of the imagination, other than pass a few classes. Definitely my role, my full-time role, was more of a requirements analyst, business liaison. I'm more on the product-facing product manager side.
Well, don't tell the software developers this, but that's the hardest part.
It's definitely a translation. I've heard that used a lot. You have to translate business needs to engineering realities and translate it back. And that carry out, that balancing act is just it's so exciting, especially when the business problem is in construction.
Well, I met with a company this morning, and they're talking about doing a generative AI project and basically analyzing documents, and that came since like, well, we need to build the prompts to analyze the documents, and they're like, well, what prompts are we going to write? I'm like, you just tell the software engineers which ones you want to do, but nobody knows which ones to do.
Yep.
It's like so much about software is figuring out, what do we need to do? Like, how do you want this thing to work?
Yep.
And sometimes there's really hard problems to solve, right? Like there could be very difficult problems to solve that engineering has to help figure out, okay, how are we going to do this thing?
Yep.
But a lot of times it's simple. It's like, well, we need the software to do X, Y, and Z. And it's really hard to get everybody to actually agree on that's what it needs to do, which it's the requirements and product.
It's such an interesting thing. This is the biggest thing I learned with my first software company was you obviously need to focus on problem, not solution. We were so infatuated with our solution that we built this, I call it a science fair project. It was technically pretty amazing. Like what it was able to accomplish was phenomenal, but it didn't solve a business need, and it didn't solve something that computed into business value, and therefore the monetization, the productization of that was near impossible. But the other flip side of that is you have to find a problem that is big enough, once again, to be solved, but it's small enough that you can solve it within a short time frame. So, a VC-backed company, we have 6 or 7 lives if we're lucky, and that's all about getting to that next threshold. And you have to have a problem that you can solve within the next 6 to 18 months, and solve it with proof, with evidence from revenue from your customers in order to justify playing another inning and going on to that next round. So it's just such an interesting dynamic, both the building products versus building engineering and a code base that's a very large delta there, and then also building a company that can incrementally grow that fits within Z-based timelines.
Yeah, writing code, building software, building a product, and building a business are all like different things,
Very, very
right?
different things.
They're very different things. So tell us a little more about your first company that you had before Plot.
Yeah, so it was called Grit, and Grit was really interesting. Like I said, it was technically very impressive. Effectively, we would use what's called the building information model. So it's a digital prototype of the building to be built, and effectively, you would take in all of the HVAC, the walls, the structure, the steel, I mean, the concrete, everything that's going there, and you would model it in 3 dimensions, and in a CAD software. So you would build that model, and what our tool did, Grit, was it would simulate different construction sequences. So it would add the concept of time to the 3 dimensions, and it would simulate construction sequences, and it would beat human schedulers. But the missing piece there was trust. So in order for our tool to be valuable, they'd had to trust our sequence over their own. And that's really hard. Schedulers in construction are some of the most respected individuals because of the know-how they have to build those schedules, and they have to rely upon those. So, it was a very impressive technical tool, but it was so hard to get a full adoption and that trust there to go out and prove the value of it.
So they didn't even see it as valuable as like a sanity check. Like my gut instincts tell me it's going to do this, but this thing kind of helped me verify my gut instincts. Like they didn't see enough value in it.
Oh, it was such a weird dynamic, and honestly, it's been a long time since I've thought about a lot of these dynamics. But it was novel. It was interesting to them because of what it said different than what was the delta between what they thought their plan was. So it was intentionally looked at as give me a different option because it would not think of construction the same way.
Okay.
Based upon so it was apples and oranges, and that's being optimistic about it. It was just so different.
Reminds me a little bit about when we were in the automotive software industry like 15 years ago. These old car dogs are like, I know what a 4-year-old Honda Civic with leather seats and 20,000. I know what that thing's worth. It's worth 12 grand. I don't need the book, Kelly Blue Book. Forget that thing. I don't need that thing. I know what this car is worth. I see them every day.
Yep.
Well, it's like the same thing, right? And people were building all this software to do valuations of cars and all this trying to AI and science and all these things. But all the old car dogs thought they knew better. It like reminds me of that. They're like, I know what this thing is worth.
And even in that example, how many Honda Civics are out there driving around? Every building that's built is a complete one-off.
Yeah.
There is no historical data for it. So there is so much wisdom and gut and hunches used in scheduling and estimation. So it was just really hard to get them on board.
You know what this also reminds me of? If you told me you built this for building software, I don't know, like this is BS. This is not going to work. Like I don't care what it says, it's wrong.
We had we were so enamored by how much like attention we were getting. Like we were getting, the articles written, the podcasts, and a lot of calls in, a lot of demonstrations. And in hindsight, it's kind of like they just wanted to see what the heck we were talking about sometimes because we made some lofty promises. And like I said, I never got the opportunity to truly see those through. It was a massive disconnect between an engineering tool and a product, and that obvious the delta between there would be value.
So as the years went by past that, did any other product ever emerge that did that? Did anybody ever figure that out?
We actually had a competitor back in the day that did a lot of the same background and engines behind it, but it was very much more about optioneering of different construction sequences. So it was closer to what the industry knew, and I think that they were close enough that they were able to bridge that divide and become a sanity check or become an optioning tool where I can see different construction schedules based upon different manpower loads, things like that. So, we realized it a little too late, and it was a number of pivots, and by the end of it, we were able to sell off the IP, but it was not what we aimed to do.
Well, I ask because sometimes it's a timing thing, or the market catches up, or the technology changes enough that it something happens. It's kind of like my example of the automotive valuations. Like now, I think everybody's given up on that. They're like, I don't know, what does the software say?
Yeah.
I think they've all given up on it by now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or and
No.
it's a new generation. Like you have a younger generation that's come in. They're like, I'm not the old car dog that's 50, 60 years old, been doing this forever. It's younger guys or gals or whatever. They're like, I don't know, what does the software say? I'm gonna go with that.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's
So tell us, you said you tried to build that. You definitely learned a lot along the way. I'm curious, what were some of the biggest learnings that you learned from that experience that have helped you a lot now with
Yeah, I think that, when we first went to market with Plot, we really, with the first tool, we really had this vision of what we wanted to build. And with the second tool with Plot, we were really focused on, we don't necessarily have we don't care what it looks like. Like we don't care what packaging it has or what exactly it does. We care the impact it has. And so we intentionally built three distinct, micro products, and we put them out into the market. And we just said, we just put them in the water and waited. So we waited to see which one got pulled, and then we doubled down on the winners and we cut the losses of the
Okay.
loop. But it was very much, let's get this out there. Let's see what gets the traction. And by traction, I do mean dollars. I don't mean kind words. I don't mean demonstrations. I mean, who's going to pay for this? And then obviously just pursue down the path of what those customers are saying would add value, would add value, would add value. So that optioneering aspect of building a product that is multifaceted and then doubling down on your winners, that's suited us pretty strongly so far.
I think you mentioned earlier before we were recording that you guys recently kind of did a little bit of a pivot, right?
Yeah, we wouldn't call it a pivot, but it was definitely, we recognized our first product had some strengths to it, but it also had some weaknesses to it. And we wanted to make sure that we were staying ahead of our own market response, that this single tool wasn't a singularly powerful enough version to be a company. As you mentioned, you build a code base that becomes a product, becomes a company. And so what we really wanted to look at was, what is an ancillary complementary tool that could work with tool one in order to take us that much further? What can 100x our growth versus the tool that's more than likely going to max out over the next 5 years? So we wanted to make sure that we just continue to be our own worst enemies or biggest doubters, and make sure that we focus on that. So our first tool is delivery coordination. Our second tool is procurement scheduling.
Delivery coordination and procurement, and those seem very similar. They sound very similar to me.
Absolutely. And what we namely found is, some of the job sites on our monitors behind us, delivery coordination is really necessary on massive job sites. So a lot of our job sites are data centers, manufacturing facilities, a lot of college campuses. Navigation is a pain. Trucks getting to the right location. I have to enter at this gate during this time because the other one's closed during the morning because of, school sessions getting out. That's a massive pain. But think about the data centers, think about the campuses, think about the manufacturing facilities. There's a lot of them, but there's only so much.
Right.
We want to be on every major construction project over $10 million, and that's our MO as our company. And we knew that product one couldn't get there, but yeah, we take one step up from delivery to placing the material order, which in general contractor worlds they always look at that as a procurement exercise.
Okay.
That is exactly we took a step to something we know, but it opens up our possible job sites 1,000-fold.
So how much did you have to change the software to?
I wouldn't say we changed it too much, but we built on a secondary module. So it's they're both standalone. You can be licensed each individually, or they can be bundled together. And so it was a complete engineering effort, equal or greater to our original.
It sounds like something would need a lot of integrations to like where you procure all this stuff from. Like, is there a whole lot of integrations that go into that too that were different?
There's a few integrations, namely to the approval processes that are legendary in construction for being problematic. So basically, the typical project management tools inside of construction that are managing basically the architects and engineers saying, "Yeah, I can order this material to install on your job site. That light fixture is not what I said I wanted." Well, you get a product data sheet that says, "Yeah, that's exactly what we approved." A few integrations, I mentioned, delivery coordination will get us 5 years. I believe procurement will get us 20, 30 years. Because even your example of connecting to the vendors, connecting to where I can actually purchase this and place orders,
Yeah.
getting to that step outside of the job site or outside of the parties that are on the job site, that is completely no man's land right now. And
Well,
obviously,
it's a lot stickier.
it's a massive. Construction is extremely fragmented. There's so many companies on a single job site, and then you add in the material vendors, you're multiplying that by
Yeah.
or 200. So
So
it's a ton.
I have a little bit of experience with this from the home services. I've
Yeah.
done some home services related software for like plumbing, HVAC, and electrical, and they have different kinds of like job tracking systems they use. And a great example of this that reminds me of your guys' product is, I don't remember the name of the company, but there's a company that does it specifically for roofers.
Okay.
And the reason they were so successful is they had all the integrations for like buying the roofing materials and quoting the roofing and all that. Like they went really deep
Yep.
into roofing, and a lot of it had to do with this procurement of all the supplies to do the roofing, and that gave them the toehold in that whole market, and they're the leader.
No, we definitely see that side of the market more structured. Definitely from the manufacturer point of view, they're looking at building marketplaces, and that's not what we are. So we're very much an efficiency workflow
Yeah.
for the general contractor of just simply when does each sub need to order each material? And it sounds like a very simple solution to solve, but once again that orchestration of these large job sites is a massive pain that every GC we talk to is fighting and using spreadsheets to try to win that fight.
So you guys made this big change to add kind of this secondary product. Did it take you a lot of time and a lot of convincing and a lot of arguments to do it? Like, were you fighting doing it for a long time, or what was that struggle like?
No, it goes back to what we are just talking about. With my first company, I was so in love with our product. I was my baby. It was what I cared about, and I didn't want anyone to call it ugly. I didn't want anyone to say that it was wrong. With the secondary tool, I don't have that emotional connection to what we're building. I simply want something that works. I simply want something that has value and an impact. And therefore, when our customers were saying, "Yeah, we'll deploy this across the job sites that makes sense," but I've got 75, 80% of my project portfolio that this tool doesn't make sense in. But if
Yeah.
you were to build this, I would absolutely pay for that. And then I would purchase you for 100% of our projects. And once they started saying that, don't get me wrong, that was not one customer.
Yeah.
That's another thing I learned in the first time is listening to one customer too much can get you in trouble.
Yeah.
And over and over and over that same thing of you have 25%, you could have 100%. It wasn't hard once we started hearing that over and over to say, yeah, this is common sense for us to move in that direction.
Started seeing the pattern pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
How long did it take you to build the other product, though?
I say we're coming up on. I say we're 15 months of dev on it right now. So it's been a much slower burn because we're obviously not dedicating the whole development team
Yeah.
to it because we are still supporting the original one and we're still building features there for sure. So it definitely has not been a full effort like the first one was.
That's the thing. Like these are always hard conundrums. You're like, well, should I build this thing? Should I not build this thing? And then when you make the decision, you're like, well, shit, how long is this going to take? Because you probably didn't think it was going to take 15 months, right? Originally, you're probably like, oh, it'll take 6 months or 12 months or whatever,
Well,
right?
and that's a hard answer to give because right, you're never done building.
Yeah.
Like when we first got it out to market, we were a good 8 to 10 months in. So
Okay.
so maybe I'll pull back that number. But yeah, I mean, to back to your question about was it hard? I think something that was a hard decision to make was should we add a product or should we truly kill one and devote our full dev team to the new product moving forward?
Yeah.
We chose not to do that. And I think that was a hard thing. So once again, we're splitting our dev efforts, we're splitting our sales efforts. But as you mentioned, the workflows are so close together that we've had a lot of our customers buying bundled licenses, which is both tools, which allowed us to just effectively double our revenue just by doubling the profits
Nice.
we're offering. So it was we wanted to keep our current tool, but I said that was probably the bigger pain or bigger decision to make was should we continue to do what we're doing or
Yeah.
should we do a full flip?
It's always the balance sometimes of short term versus long term thinking. Like the company I met with this morning, they're losing money, they're out of money, they're worried, are they going to go bankrupt? We need to raise some money and figure out how to bridge this thing until we can get revenue going. Like they're kind of a victim of the real estate financial crisis crap. They're like, oh, we could build this AI thing and this would be really cool. We can do this and we can do that. And I'm like, well, it might take you several months to get there. Like, what is the quickest path to revenue? Like that was their struggle, is like, what is the quickest path to revenue? Because otherwise they're done.
Yeah,
Like, there's always, sometimes it's the balance of short term versus long term thinking,
absolutely.
and it sounds like you figured out how to balance that. Like, okay, well, we already have revenue, we already have this product, we'll keep making a few changes to it, we'll put more of our effort into the other product,
Yeah.
so we got both bets going on at the same time. But it's hard, especially when you're the one trying to make this decision and you're up at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling. You're like, I don't know what to do. Like it's hard. It's a really hard decision.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I've been lucky enough to had friends and connections to other founders who they're the only ones I feel like that truly understand the complexity of those type of decisions and the emotional weight that lives on. I mean, you've obviously got investors, you got employees, you've got partners that are all obviously betting on you, and you want to make sure that you make the right call because there's no playbook for this. For every little decision that needs to be made.
How is AI affecting what you guys do, or does it affect it at all?
I think it's really early, especially for our company. So I think that it has a lot of potential. I think that I'll go back to the word I used earlier and trust. I think that the industry has a trusted version to software in general, let alone AI. But I do see that, LLMs and a lot of the kind of ease of use functionalities that are making data available or exposing data in a way that is more accessible for non-power users. I think that that makes sense. Talking to your data is really great for someone who can't query. So that makes some incremental gains. I think in the near future, I think that it's going to be a while before we see major impacts, but there are sectors, there are groups of generative AI that are making impacts in the design world, for the architects and the land developers, that side. And we think that that will gradually kind of move towards us. But at the end of the day, we're working in a physical world. Like we have physical problems. We deal with weather. We deal with, manpower. We deal with a lot of things. So it's not that I don't think it'll have an impact. It's just that I think that the bets being placed today are still majorly in the area of workflow efficiency gains and maximizing the output of dwindling manpower or workforce, because that's a big problem right now.
I mean, you deal with some very unpredictable,
Yeah.
tough to deal with things. Like you said, weather, humans, transportation. Like none of those are fun to deal with at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And so much of what happens on a job site goes undocumented. It goes, we have daily logs that are effectively there for the lawyers to argue over afterwards, and they don't really capture what happens. They don't really capture the efficiencies and the productivity. And then again, you have 30 companies all doing work on the same
Yeah.
footprint that they have their own data. They all have their own processes, and we're still getting subcontractors and material vendors into that digital norm. And so I think we have a way to go. But being able to talk to your data, being able to expose things that are usually reserved for those power users, I think that that's an easy win. But do I believe it's going to overhaul and change our industry overnight? No. Do I think that it will be a foundational piece of every construction technology software in 5 years? Yes, but a part of it for sure.
So what is it like selling to general contractors? Are they getting more and more high tech these days, or are they still fighting it, to the end of trying to avoid the technology?
Yeah, so we work with probably the largest general contractors that you can think of, in the world. So we really focus on those large corporations and those corporations that have that type of revenue and that type of manpower. They have dedicated innovation departments or at least operations technology departments that they're out vetting software. They're out saying yes and no to different pilots.
Okay.
But everything in construction is you must prove it. So you can think back into how these contractors look at their power tools, they look at their equipment. That thing cannot break. That thing cannot fall apart. It cannot. And if there's anything wrong, I need someone there to service it. I need someone there to come make it right immediately. It's not something that you can just let me go and I'll be okay with that. So they always approach a new software with a bit of distrust. And you got to win that over. So in construction software, you're always going to pilot. You're always going to run typically a project or two, and then get the project team's feedback. And as every project is different, your tool has to be valuable enough on a wide variety of different projects that pilot is successful. And that's the only way you grow to be deployed across every job site in that portfolio.
How do you guys sell your software?
Yeah, so we actually license the project itself. So we look at the size of the project. We license it to the general contractor, but it's unlimited users. Most of those users are the trade partners that the GC has hired to work on site. But we license the project similar to the subcontracts and the material purchase orders that they have on their site. In construction, everything is project based.
How do you actually reach them? Like, how do you find new customers?
Yeah, so it's a wide variety. We're getting better and better with our digital presence. Paid search, paid social, getting out there and cultivating leads through inbound. But a lot of the industry still runs on trade shows and network, asking who do you know that I could talk to about this, referrals, things like that. So it is some of the old school methodologies, but more and more, every day someone retires from construction that wouldn't look at a TikTok or an Instagram ad, and someone comes into the industry that does. And so we will continue to kind of build up both capabilities.
So does trade shows and referrals are the top sources for you?
I would say of what we've brought on board to date, yes, we would attribute most of those to those networking in person and networking through our existing networks.
It's so interesting from one product, one company to another, how their go-to-market strategy that works is so dramatically different. And a lot of people don't think like, oh, trade shows. Well, a lot of industry trade shows are still a huge thing because they can meet somebody, shake their hand, get to know them, build a little trust with them before they decide they want to do this thing versus like some spam email. They're like, I don't know this person.
Absolutely. No, there's so much noise in the industry right now, and it's not just coming from software; it's coming from the building materials manufacturers. So a lot of those emails are very quickly ignored, and you best case is they're ignored. Worst case, you get a mental block that they'll never talk to you. But a lot of things in construction are built on relationships, and we continue to evaluate other ways, but that's how we've found the most of our customers so far.
Well, we see the same thing at Full Scale. A lot of our customers are from word of mouth, referrals, networking, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Once again, the podcast is brought to you by Full Scale. You can check us out at fullscale.io if you need help with software development. This was Chris Callen, the founder and CEO of Plot. Do you have any other final words of wisdom as we round out the show today?
No, I think that we always like to be a promoter of our industry because in conversations like this or podcasts like this, construction isn't always well represented, but we just like to show off that the industry is going through a pretty major shift, and we're always looking for new people to be a part of that journey, either on the software side or on that contractor side.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.